Hi, I'm Ken Olandt. You may remember me as Jason Vigo from Star Trek: The Next Generation, and you're listening to Trek Untold.
Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. On this week's show, we're talking to Ken Olandt, who is an actor who I've personally seen in so many things, and chances are that means you have too. Ken went from dreams of being an ice hockey player to becoming a model and eventually finding his way towards acting. And after a very successful career in acting, he then turned his eyes towards producing films. So Ken is a guy who's been all over this world in terms of the entertainment business, and he has a lot to say about all sorts of different things. Ken's direct connection to the Star Trek world comes from a character he played on the 7th season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and that character was Jason Vigo from the episode Bloodlines. If you haven't seen that one in a while, that character is the maybe, maybe not son of Captain Picard, and yeah, it goes through quite a journey. It's a real interesting episode, and Ken gets to spend a lot of time with Patrick Stewart in that one. So as you can imagine, he's got a lot of really fascinating stories to tell about his time on that set. But beyond Star Trek, you may remember him from his roles in Leprechaun, Riptide, Matt Houston, Days of Our Lives, Summer School, Highway to Heaven, Murder, She Wrote, Jag, and an obscure little show called Superforce that he started, which is this interesting syndicated TV show that, he's going to explain it a lot better than I can, but you're going to want to hear these stories from that show. Ken is one of those guests who I could have easily just sat there listening to for hours upon hours because he had so many interesting things to say, so many cool stories, a lot of great insight, and he's just overall a really cool dude. I legitimately feel like my cool factor has just risen 10 levels just by spending a little bit of time with him. And that should tell you how uncool I am if I think that coolness is measured by some sort of bizarre level system. So with any luck, this episode will be a lot cooler than the host of the show currently is. So let's dive into our discussion with Ken Olandt, talk about some Star Trek, talk about some Leprechauns, talk about some Summer School, and pretty much everything else in between. But before we start talking to this week's guest, I want to remind you guys to make sure you are following Trek Untold on all forms of social media. You can check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, all at Trek Untold, and that's one word, Trek Untold, no spaces in between. That's the best way to stay up to date on who our guests are for the week, learn all about them before the show begins, and check out all the random memes I post, because yeah, I do a lot of that too. If you're in a position to financially support the show, please consider becoming a Patreon member. Head over to patreon.com/trekuntold to see all the different ways you can help financially at different contribution levels. Some of the perks include early access to the episodes, having the chance to ask guests questions, and hopefully some more stuff that I'm going to figure out pretty soon. It is easily the best way to directly connect with me, as well as to meet other fans of this show. If you're looking to buy some Trek Untold merchandise, don't worry, that's going to be coming very soon. If you prefer to check out the video version of this podcast, head over to youtube.com/nerdnewstoday, where every Sunday I post these episodes in video format, which includes a lot of images and video from the guests that we're talking to. But the most important thing you can do to help support this show is please leave us ratings and reviews if you're checking us out on iTunes, on Spotify, or other audio platforms that allow you to leave reviews and ratings, or by subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as giving our Trek Untold videos thumbs up, likes, and comments. All these interactions help push our podcast to the very top of these different platforms to make sure more Star Trek fans can find us. It costs you nothing to do other than a few moments of your time, so please, if you haven't done that already, consider doing so. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and beam up this week's guest. Computer, access interview file. Hello and welcome back to Trek Untold, and now joining us on the other side of the screen, we have a guest who has climbed rocks with the Starfleet captain. He has sailed on the Love Boat. He's pitied the fool while he's also been young and restless. But most importantly, he has punched a leprechaun repeatedly in the face. Mr. Ken Olandt, how are you today?
What a great intro. Yeah, you just kind of like summed up a whole career right there and all those little cliches.
Well, we have far more to go to than just that, though. There's plenty to talk about here, and I'm super excited to talk to you because you're a face I've seen in a lot of things too. So, when I found out it was Ken that I was talking to, I got super excited, doing all my research, watching all these things again I hadn't seen in years. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be a lot of fun. So, hopefully, you feel the same way by the time we're done with this. We'll see how it goes in an hour from now.
Right. No, I love the looking back on the, it's always great when you have memories that come out. Facebook has these, throwbacks or memories from certain time. And I've stayed in touch with a lot of people that I worked with in the past. And it's really great to see them again, just in so natural circumstances, but it really does bring back great memories from the past.
Very cool. Now, we're going to get to the deep Star Trek stuff in a little bit, but first things first, Ken, I want to ask you a question I like to ask all my guests, and that's what's your earliest memory of Star Trek? Did you grow up watching it at all?
Absolutely did. I grew up, I think it was 6 o'clock, and yeah, it was 6 o'clock, and we had only 3 channels back then. We had a UHF, but when you watched it, if you missed it, it was gone. I don't even think there were reruns back then. But it was really, I grew up watching Star Trek for sure. And what's really cool was later in life, I got to hire, Captain William Bill Shatner, and work for one of the movies that I was producing.
Oh yeah, we're going to talk about that. We're going to get to that too. But yeah, let's just continuing on the secret origin story of Ken Olandt here. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up, who your parents were and what they did, and what little Ken wanted to be when he grew up? Was he always going to be an actor, or did he have aspirations for something else?
Yeah, no, little Ken wanted to be a professional ice hockey player. And there was, I did some modeling in high school, and I do recall as far back as the 4th grade when somebody asked me what I wanted to do, and I said actor, and I had no idea where that came from. I really don't. I mean, to this day, I remember exactly when it happened and where it was, but it wasn't really a plan for me. I really loved ice hockey and wanted to keep playing, and it wasn't until later that acting would come around. I think I was pretty much infatuated with the success and the wholesomeness of Donnie and Marie Osmond. I thought that whole thing was like the coolest, all that whole Tiger Beat era, the Cal Sills. This is my era when you have young families, young guys and girls that are all, they're singing and they're good, and they're mod. They have the long hair with the swoop, so we all had to wear certain styles. And these guys that's who we looked to. We'd drive into town to get that teen magazine. That was really hard to find. One drugstore that was the big one that had it, and you'd go there, and your mother would go shopping, and you just sit there and pour through the magazines. It was always those Tiger Beat kind of stuff for kids.
Well, just remember, if you're trying to be Donny Osmond, you don't get to kiss Marie Osmond in the way you probably want to. So, problem for future.
That'd be the untold story, wouldn't it?
Yes. Now, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Canada? I read.
I grew up in Canada, Vancouver. Well, I grew up all over. We started in Berkeley, California, and then we moved to Iowa for 1 year, and then moved back, and then to Texas for a year, Houston, and then back. And then my father was offered a job with overseas in Libya, and so we had moved to Vancouver for a year to 2 years prior, and then he got into that and said, "Forget it." He quit his job because it was, Gaddafi was in power. It was really horrible. And at that point, my brother and I were scheduled to go to school in Switzerland at a boarding school. And that whole thing just happened in 2 weeks. Nope, you're going to stay in Canada, and that's it. And that's where we stayed, Vancouver.
And to put that into context, the reason we're mentioning Gaddafi's name here is because your dad was in the oil business, right?
He was with Standard Oil. Yeah, he's in oil business. Well, he
was
was
more
more
like in There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, not even like a monopoly set. It was really more like he was a petrochemical engineer, and was really more of a scientist engineer. So he was called in to help troubleshoot with refineries, nothing to do with anything other than the actual production of oil, right? And so, unfortunately, that job was in jeopardy around guys like Gaddafi. So he went back to work with a company in Calgary, I think, where I lived. I lived there for a summer school period of time. And then, but mostly Vancouver was the beautiful city, great place to grow up, skiing right there, hockey everywhere, so it was great.
Now, were you the kind of kid who was doing school plays once you kind of figured out you wanted to go in that direction, or what were you kind of like back then as a young student?
No, it was weird. We were too cool to be doing that stuff because the way our school was set up is people who were into the plays. I don't know, it was just kind of I think it's the only prejudice you'll find in high school in Canada at that time was that kind of thing. But my friend Alan Lougheed and I did try out for a play for fun. It was Finian's Rainbow. We played two young, it's I can't say it. We've covered our faces, so we were like these little poor kids, and it was one of the yeah, edit that part out because it sounds so not cool today, but it's true. We did. We had we put all this tan on our faces, and we would have fun mimicking it. Oh, then we'd laugh with each other. We were not actors in any way or trying. We were just having a lot of fun. Part of me on the play. That was it. But I got into modeling a little bit. Somebody said something to me, and I think I started doing some modeling through a friend, local modeling, commercials here and there in Vancouver, nothing big or that were really at the time. And then it wasn't until, I left to come down to LA to go to school at the Art Center in Pasadena. I was headed for advertising because I wasn't going to make it in hockey. So I got into that school, and that's when things really changed.
Yeah, interesting. I'm curious to hear, because I read on your IMDb that you went to an art school basically, and I went to an art school also, so I feel your pain.
Oh.
But I'm curious, what you took from your art school experience into your acting experience. I mean, was there kind of a transition into that, or did any of that kind of influence what you did later on once you got into acting?
It really that art school. When you're already in an art school and you're an artist and you're getting accepted into a high level school or a quality school, that doesn't really have any change or impact on you as an individual. You're already at that place. The effect or the impact that it did provide was after the sixth term, they let me know very politely, look, your work's good, but you're never here. Maybe you should go do something else for a while. And what had happened is I'd gotten involved with a lot of these, the new age self-help groups, very counter, encounter group kind of stuff. And that woke me up to emotions and honesty and interactions with people. I found that really alive and captivating and just genuine. It's just amazing when you're with a room of 300 people and a lot of realities getting kicked around and stuff's put out there and you share yourself. You fall in love with a huge group of people, and you find in yourself a confidence to be willing to present in front of lots of people and open up. And that really made an impact for me. And from that, I went to meet a girl from that event, and she was at a restaurant, and it was called Hamptons on Highland, which is like a hamburger joint. And I went there to meet her, and she was with a bunch of people who stood up to meet me, made me look important. And that, as I'm shaking their hands, it caught the attention of an agent at the time, was Harry Gold. And his daughters, Tracy, Brandy, and Missy Gold, he had an agency and he was representing his kids, basically. He was there with his wife, Bonnie, and they were having an argument. And then she noticed me from the waitress and so forth. And she goes, who's he? Who is he? He's an actor. And I guess I look like an actor. So I got their card through the waitress, who's also a friend. And next thing you know, I'm, meeting with them, and I go out for auditions.
And that's an interesting journey too, because you talk about, starting out in modeling and then going to these encounters and wanting to be more in touch with your feelings and be more open and outward with them. But, modeling is so much more about the outside as opposed to acting, which is a lot more about the inside. So, once you started to actually go into that, did you find that to be challenging at all?
The modeling really was just stand there and smile. It wasn't, you didn't have to do much anything, and when we're all young at that age, for the most part, we don't have to worry too much about, things we would later in life, because our bodies aren't the same shape as we were back then. It was really more, I wouldn't say the modeling had anything to do with it, other than I did get one experience when I walked out on a stage at a high school. We were modeling for a high school, and I got that feeling of that crowd adoration when I walked out. The girls and everything, they all went, woo, and that was fun, and definitely an ego stroke and all that great stuff, and acceptance when you're young and you're in late teens and so forth, because there's so much pressure in school in many other ways at that era, at that age. And kids go through such difficult times. This was one of those sweet spot moments where you just had this, man, I'm a star. I feel like these idols these people that I've been looking at and wanted to be, got a chance to have a taste of that. That was back in Vancouver. Coming down to LA, the real nitty gritty of going out on interviews, and I was ready for that, because from the encounter group stuff and really, working on and being around that amount of openness and honesty, that's what acting is. It's the reaction of people to each other in a situation, and recreating of that genuinely, the art of human relation. And this prepared me. It's such a great way to be comfortable, almost to the point where I was like too present at times, because it was not intense, but I just really was drinking in the idea of being with somebody and so intimately, just being with them and doing these scenes. And that really was different than, situations where actors find themselves. Because when I was producing, I found that actors got very nervous in their heads. And I went, no, be out here with me. And don't worry about anything. Just tell me what your character needs me to know and come from that. And that was fun, really fun.
It's a much more cerebral kind of approach to things. So, we're talking about art school, we're talking about modeling here, but did you have any like formal acting training, or was it just that you did these encounters and that's kind of what gave you the tools to perform?
Well, I just said no, I didn't have any. I did have acting later, but in classes I would go to, but I was, Harry said, Ken, you got 6 callbacks to One Life to Live. And I'm getting an episode of Matt Houston and this, these little things are starting to come along. He goes, you got to get into acting class. You got to learn technique and all these things. So I went to meet Gordon Hunt, who was Helen Hunt's dad, and he had an acting class there. He also was a character, a director for animation and stuff, for voice acting. And it was right across the parking lot of this dance studio called Joe Tremaine's, dancing. And that's where I met my wife. I saw her, and that I'd say that was the best part of that whole, acting experience of classes I met Janine. Later, I would get classes. I remember George Clooney, who has been a friend for years, and we were working together at one point at the same level. We weren't working together. We worked together in one show, but it was my series, and he goes, series regular. Who's this dude? Anyways, we became real good friends, and he introduced me to Bill Howie, who was an acting coach, Milton Consellis, that group. So I started doing that stuff, but I didn't really come through, Matt, because I was getting work. And I'm not going to stop acting work for an acting class. When they say you have an agreement to be here, I go, no, I have a job at 4 a.m. in San Pedro. I'm not staying up till midnight or 11 in Hollywood to do an acting class. It's not going to happen. So that's really where it kind of, the training really didn't go as it should have. I did some of it.
More on the job.
Really you know what? You learn so much more. Oh, Howard Fine, big plug for Howard, because Howard did shape me as an actor from that point forward, because I would do private classes with him. And he really, I thought, was instrumental in over time of really, getting me focused on a proper technique and proper training and how I could develop that way. So I'd say Howard Fine for sure.
Do you remember what your very first professional acting gig was?
Yep. Yeah, the very first. Well, it's. I think the very first was a Days of Our Lives. I think, and I had 5 lines and under kind of thing. They
5 lines gets you your SAG card.
Yeah, SAG after, one of those things. But I think that was it. And I just remember that was the moment. I didn't have much to do, but it was just one of those situations where it felt really at home. It was really fun, very playful, very like being in the circus or being, in that kind of environment. It was really, I had a good time. Didn't really come into any acting. It was just a couple lines, and you're not really supposed to do a whole lot when you're just one of those characters. You say your line and, forward the story. Later, when I think it was Matt Houston, an episode of Matt Houston where I played a streetwalker, a young guy who's a runaway who's now selling his body and stuff for money, and I am a witness to something, a clue about a murder of a young girl. And I think what got me the role is I didn't play it affected in any way. I just played it straight, naturally, like the person was, and I didn't see any need to do anything. It was really more that, and I think that was a cool acknowledgement, I guess, of being on the right track. This trust your instincts more and more and more and more. And the more you do, the better it gets, the easier it gets, the more everyone will trust you. The more you second guess it, the more you worry about it, the more you back up the confidence and try to do it becomes more, that becomes the message being sent. And then that's tough. Then you're like, now you're working uphill. So that was that Matt Houston episode.
I want to jump into a movie I really just like having to get to rewatch again for this interview, and that's Summer School. And that's
Yeah.
directed by Carl Reiner. It starred Mark Harmon, and plus, that movie has a lot of other big up and comers too at the time. You got Dean Cameron, who was some real hot stuff at that point. Courtney Thorne Smith, Kelly Jo Minter, and of course, a little known actress. You might have heard of her, Kirstie Alley. But you played Larry, who is the student who pretty much spends his school days sleeping all the time because at night he's out stripping. And by the way, I told my girlfriend that you were in the movie, and she was like, "Was he the stripper?" Like she knew right away. So you clearly left a mark on her, for better or for worse for me. But yeah, I feel like that was like a big break for you, right? Like, was that a big moment for you?
Yeah, it is because that's a level of a movie that you want to get to as quickly as you can, and fortunately enough, I didn't have a really big role, but I was in every scene that the kids were in for the most part, and Carl treated us all like we were all a family, a group. He dealt with the kids that needed to when they were, focusing on their scenes. Like Dean had lots of scenes and Kelly had hers, and so Pat, they were like family. We were all like kids from school, and like we're buddies. And Carl really was so sweet and took care of us that way. And he was so much fun to be on. My thing was, was pretty simple, because all I had to do was just, fake like I'm sleeping, or actually sleeping sometimes. And then the strip scene was the big one. That was, but I had a lot of working out. I had to get my body in as close as I could to look or resemble and do, any kind of respect to a real professional stripper guy. We'd apply a little makeup here and there to help me out. Carl Ryan or Mark Harmon kept telling me I was shaving my butt. He was such a fun guy. Mark is that whole experience. Some of my best memories. Eating crispy, what was those crackers, saltine crackers, in under a minute, and trying to whistle. With Kirstie. At a bench with a couple of people from the crew, and it was a beautiful afternoon on the beach there. One bit of trivia, those cantaloupes they throw in the air that explode. If you look carefully at the camera, you'll see one chunk come right off to the right, or whatever it was. That hit me straight in the eye. I was like, whack, knocked me almost out. It was my memory of that particular scene.
So you got some PTSD from doing summer school, basically.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And whatever you do in that stripper scene, clearly it left a mark on a lot of people. Because, like I said, my girlfriend knew right away. Yeah, whatever. I'm not going to touch you more than that. But yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more actually about working with Carl Reiner, because he's someone whose work, I think everybody out there admires a lot. I mean, that's an understatement. He's such a legendary director. How would you describe the way that he works? How would you describe the way that he worked with, especially a group of younger kids?
Yeah. So Carl and actually was Jerry Lewis. I got to work with him as well.
I got plenty of questions about Jerry.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, basically, they tell you don't let anybody mess with the 8-year-old in you. Don't let a director screw with the 8-year-old, and that's really important, because therein lies a lot of the creativity and the fun and the carefree. Carl kept us all light and fun. He's a master. He was a master of comedy and at the improv and rolling with it, keeping it flowing, same with Jerry. It's their old school. They get it rolling. You don't stop for anything. Don't stop the flow. Stay with it. And that was one of the best things, was Carl was able to allow and find in everybody this confidence, and then they could deliver, and we just felt totally safe around him. He created on Halloween, our show ran over Halloween. He arranged for us to have these honey wagons, food wagons brought in, and they had a mariachi band, and then all the departments dressed up in various different costumes. Mark dressed like Carl, actually, the headphones, the white shirt, now, and the hair wig, but all of it was really fun. That doesn't happen on a normal feature film set. A lot of people take themselves too seriously, but because Carl was like Hollywood royalty, anything he wanted we get, and everything was appropriate.
And I'm glad you mentioned Jerry Lewis already, because I definitely have questions about him. Let's just go right on into that now. But I guess we should kind of preface how you got into working with Jerry Lewis, because this is on a show you did called Superforce. And I don't know if my TV stations locally didn't get it or not. I didn't know about it, but again, I told other people, and they're like, "Oh my God, you talking about Superforce?" And apparently it still has a huge following. I'm like looking at that up on YouTube now and like watching it. I'm like, this actually is pretty cool. But I guess before we get into Jerry Lewis, because I do have a bunch of questions about Superforce, would you mind kind of giving us the elevator synopsis of what that show was?
So the elevator synopsis is a good point. The show is about a fellow who's an astronaut with really good hair, and he goes away up, to space and comes back only to find out the world's gone to hell in the year 2020, right? And
Surprise,
as he
surprise,
comes back,
2020.
2020, lots of changes here and there, and so he ends up coming into this lab where the person that he knew, E.B. Hungerford, is now a computer, living his essence is living in the computer. And the sidekick, played by Larry B. Scott, was this, FX Spinner, who's this, scientist who runs everything. We become the crime-fighting duo because my spacesuit is then converted to be like an urban assault, military police slash, weapon. And then the motorcycle is a product as well. That's provided too as BMW, and Bob Short created that. So it's kind of, we got, I think our review on People magazine was pretty cool trash. and I think they're referring to the idea that because this is the trashy part of television, in the sense that from network television, everything was the top notch, ABC, CBS, NBC. Those were all the big budget, the big national viewings. This syndicated world was kind of the junky world of wannabes and attempts at this and that, right? And they're funding themselves by running around the country selling the TV advertising time. That's what NAPTI was all about there. So that's really the big genesis, if you will, of the Star, Superforce and all those kind of things. Yeah. So then Jerry Lewis, how did Jerry Lewis come up, right? So also, but it's really hard to have this show have anything Jeopardy because you're in Florida. Everything's green and lush and beautiful. Even futuristic, it's really tough. So they had to shoot everything at night in a Universal Studios lot, and has a lot of negotiations to find the dirtiest part of Universal to get some kind of edge going on. So the producers were master negotiators at pulling stuff off, and this guy Jim McNamara wrangled up a deal with Jerry Lewis to come do a half-hour episode, and it was like one of those miraculous moments as a young kid, let alone person as an actor. Here you are standing next to a legend, right? And he's directing you, and this wasn't a comedy, but he knew how to find the comedy in it. But it was really, really a thrill for me because, just to kind of step back and see the wider scope. I've been so lucky, man. I mean, Michael Landon, right? Carl Reiner, Jerry Lewis, so many of these guys down from Ernst Borgnine, just old icons and mainstays in the business. So very lucky to have had that time.
Yeah, it's really cool to be able to work with Jerry Lewis. And quick trivia for you too, Ken. Do you know what piece of filming equipment that Jerry Lewis is attributed to creating?
I'm going to say the whip cam or something like that. What is it?
Video assist. It was getting playback actually while you're there. It's all thanks to Jerry Lewis, or at least supposedly attributed to him. So yeah, he wanted to basically have how Jerry Lewis is. He wanted more control on the set to make sure he could see what was going on and have that ability. So video assist is thanks to him.
Yeah, very nice to know that. I didn't know that. That's very cool.
So another thing is, you mentioned that you guys are on Universal Studios set, and that kind of made a lot of sense for this other guy I'm going to ask you about now, because around that same time you were doing Superforce, World Championship Wrestling was filming their their syndicated wrestling show also, and you got to do an episode with Sting. And I am a big pro wrestling mark, so I got to ask, I saw the fight scene of you with Sting as well. Tell me about working with the Stinger.
Oh, he was a cool guy. These guys that they brought in were larger than life, but whenever you're on the set, they're just really sweet and they're really fun. I later came across Sting in Saugus out here, where our kids were competing at a track meet. And it was one of those moments where you go, hey, man. I go, yeah, where's your blonde hair now? It was gone. So, yeah, Sting was in an episode. The cool thing about that show is it gave everybody a chance to be kind of an arch enemy or a super in a fictitious, a world where they have a sort of superpower or, playing into what they do. We had, for example, Lou Ferrigno. He came on and did an episode, and his character is called Eugene, which is Eugene, as if it's a Eugene because he's genetically created. And I got to know Lou and man, I later saw him at a Chiller of convention, which I only one I've ever done, and he was there. And it was such a thrill to see him again. He's such a nice, just terrific people, and he's a great, great guy. I don't know if I imagine he's still around because he's pretty rock solid. But that show brought in a lot of people from all different walks. We had Tracy Lords and Ginger Lynn, but we also had a fellow who was G. Gordon Liddy. Yep. And G. Gordon Liddy, for a lot of the viewers may or may not know, he was a huge part of this country's, political scene / military, FBI. I mean, his stories were pretty amazing. He would tape thumbtacks down his arm reversed out because he was getting grabbed in Hayes in high schools because he wasn't a big buff, he was scrawny, and that was his way of fighting back, and people would beat him up and rough, and they hurt their hands on his thumbtacks. One time he had a little room in on the trailer only because he's only in there for an hour for the scene, and then he was gone, and they just didn't plan enough well, and they got him in a very small room, and they said, "We're sorry, Mr. Liddy." He goes, "Oh, don't worry, I've been in much smaller rooms." You can only imagine.
You got to work with him again in 18 Wheels of Justice, right?
Yeah, 18 Wheels of Justice. I was called in on that show because I'd done a few Renegades with Lorenzo Lamas, and the producers were. I have a tendency to kind of be, a jokester on set. I like to have fun, like a lot of Jim Carrey stuff, goof around, make fun of, break the levity, and they needed this. Apparently, they wanted that element on that set because there was a little bit too much tension for some reason, and so I thought that was kind of cool. Great, invite me down to make people laugh. I'll do it, and it was fun, 18 Wheels of Justice is a weird kind of show, but the more you think about it, the trucks are pretty groovy. You get inside one of those things, and it's a cool environment.
Yeah. I'm just thinking I need to have like a separate podcast just to talk all about 18 Wheels of Justice, and another one to do Renegade. That's going to be a whole other series of shows for me down the line. But
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, right. You have a lot of indirect and direct Star Trek connections throughout your career. You already mentioned Shatner, and we'll get to him again a little bit later. But there's one really fun one that I want to talk to you about because it's actually a series. You're going to be surprised to hear this. We chat about a lot on Trek Untold, and that is Murder, She Wrote. Anytime I get somebody who does Star Trek, chances are they did Murder, She Wrote. So I got to ask you about that. And your episode, too, had you got Dean Butler, Chad Everett, Brenda Vaccaro, who you got to smooch. But the Trek connection here is Jeannie Francis. And Jeannie is, for folks who don't know, the wife of Jonathan Frakes. And she's also, looking at her career, too, she's a legend. I mean, she is Laura from Laura and Luke.
Amazing, isn't it? How we are all so connected. Was Jeannie on my episode?
She was, yeah. She, you hit on her for most of it. For most of your scenes with her, you basically hit on her.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Wow.
You had a few scenes with Angela also. So yeah, I'd just love to hear some stories about Jeannie.
Yeah, Brenda Vaccaro. I remember Brenda Vaccaro very well, and Angela. Angela was, man, she just commanded so much respect on that show. And I think Vince McAbee was the director, and he also had me on, I think, Simon and Simons and things like that. But that show was, I think, the fourth episode of television or third. I hadn't gotten very many shows in that time. I don't even remember now. I swear it sounds pompous, but I just looking back over how many years, 30 something years, I can barely remember a lot of who came for. I've looked at the IMDb, but that had a lot of not only the cool people I would later like to see on Trek and things like that, but these were all quality actors back in the day. They were not just something that kind of finds its way not that Baywatch isn't of quality, but you know what I'm saying? They weren't hired for that kind of look. Well, they were hired for acting because they were stage actors. A lot of them, they were trained in stage actors and done dramas and things like that. They weren't hired for a look, for a sexy look. They were hired for their skills and talent. That's different. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I mean, did you get to spend any time hanging out with Angela or get to do much with her? If you remember it all.
No, I can tell you exactly. No, I remember we shot this house across in Pasadena, and I remember we did talk about. The one conversation we had was we could see across the ravine was the house where Batman. They shot the TV series. Batman would come out of the tunnel.
Oh wow!
And that was the point where that Bat car would roll out, and she knew a lot of stuff. I was a little, you be respectful around someone like Angela. He does not. You talk when when you're talking, you talk when you're spoken to. You don't just do, just be very, very, polite on set, appropriate. when you're around people like Angela and others of that ilk. That's that level of bodied work. Yeah, it's important for if you want to stick around.
Yeah, I feel like I spend more time in these episodes talking about Murder, She Wrote than I do Star Trek. It's just a thing I'm into. I don't know why, but yeah, it's just my thing. One day I'm gonna get her on the show somehow.
Oh yeah, well, you should. She could tell you a million because everybody has gone through that show.
Yeah,
So
pretty
many
much.
people because she was on for so long, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody got anything that they would ever say. They always say a Murder She Wrote was one of those shows that was a mark in their career as, up there. That's one you did. I look now, I still get residuals from it, which is pretty
Nice.
impressive.
Well, you're gonna get some from me. I just rewatched that episode, so you're welcome.
Very good.
Now, I got one last thing here before we do jump into the Trek stuff, and that is Leprechaun. And that was like the first thing I thought about when I saw your name. I was like, oh man, we're gonna get to talk about Leprechaun because I've never had a chance to discuss this film. And again, I got to rewatch it just this weekend to refresh my memory on it. And this is so cool because it's like I always forget that Jennifer Aniston is in this film because you always just think of her now as like Friends. And this is basically a year away from her doing Friends now, so it's like she's just on the cusp of things, really picking up, and it's just so crazy to watch this thing. So. I mean, was this film as fun to make as it was to watch? Because it's still pretty damn fun to watch.
Oh, it was. We had so much fun, and I think the fact that we really none of us had. I think the biggest, star of the show was Mark Holton. He done Pee-wee's Big Adventure, right?
That's true.
I mean, I was in an ensemble cast of Summer School, and I think I'd done April Fool's Day. Jen was on a couple of shows. I don't even know if she'd gotten on a series or anything like that. Maybe she'd done a few things. Her dad was an actor, but Mark, really from Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure we're the guy with the chops and all that stuff. And but Jen, the show was so fun because we shot it up on this set where they shot Little House on the Prairie, and it was up in Simi Valley, and it was so cold. So cold. We spent so much time in the trailers hanging out together. And with Warwick and his wife, and hearing all of his stories back in England and this and that, it was really, really, really fun to do that show. One thing we noticed that Mark Jones, the director, he's still doing so many great things these days. He wrote the show to be as if Disney were to make a horror film. He didn't want it to be anything like a scary movie or a horror film. It was more of a Disney's dark movie, if you would. And that's because you could tell from the walls were painted black, and then primary colors are painted over them. And then no doors are straight. They're all cattywomp a little bit. So everything is just a little off. And then remember when we were looking at the set and walking around and we were checking our wardrobe out, the wardrobe, I picked mine out and they all said, "You're going to be really glad you picked that jacket, Ken." Why is that? Because it's going to be like 30 at night. And I looked at Jen and she's wearing this black leotard outfit. And I'm going, "Oh my gosh, you're going to freeze." It was, but it was really fun on set. We shot the whole thing up there. They ended up they didn't give it the quality, but they printed it too dark. I think they're trying to go for the horror film from what they'd sold it as, and it really just never was a horror film. So they just printed it darker and just kind of made it hard to see. And it's hard to make a horror film about a guy who's running around polishing shoes, and he's easily distracted from killing you from polishing shoes. And it's preposterous. It's funny, right?
And it totally is like you said. I love the description. You said it's like Disney does a horror movie because they basically break like every horror movie rule. Like the first scene of the film, you see the leprechaun. They're not really hiding that too much. And then later on, when you finally actually have your first face-to-face confrontation, I mean, first off, it's a pretty funny scene. But then second of all, it is a leprechaun. I mean, so then basically you, Jennifer Aniston, the little kid, they all start beating the shit out of Warwick Davis, which is just, I love that scene too. And by the way, there was a stunt double, I assume, right? That wasn't Warwick Davis getting beat on?
Well, the stunt double is Deep Roy. And Deep Roy,
wow.
Do you know Deep Roy?
Yeah.
Yeah, Deep's been in a ton of stuff, and he was the Oompa Loompa guy in Johnny Depp's Willy Wonka. I actually unfortunately broke Deep's hand. He got too close to me as I was tethered to a bear trap in my leg. I couldn't move that because I'd fall out of it, and I'm swinging my flashlight, and he got a little too close with his hand. You're supposed to stage this stuff, and a combination of both of us. I swung a little too hard for performance, and he got a little too close and just clipped his hand, and I think I might have broken a bone in his hand, and I felt so bad for that. But Deep was he's a stunt guy, right? So he knows the drill. It's not fun. Yeah.
And we should add he was also in the Abrams Star Trek movies too. So it's another Star Trek connection for you.
Solid. Yeah.
So, they say that you always learn something on every set that you're on. So I'm curious, like, what was the lesson that you learned from being on Leprechaun?
Anything specific about like what, in life or in acting or in?
Well, either
I
one,
tell you what I did learn. I'll tell you this, and because later I would be a producer, and that was the first independent movie I'd ever done. Prior to that was 2 Paramount pictures, Summer School and April Fool's Day, and then before that was network television. So there's times in your career where you kind of dip below the equator and you do some things that are like, should I do this show? It's not really, does it help the career? Like Love American style, the remake of the remake, and you think maybe I shouldn't do this, but whatever. So in this situation here, what I learned was I went to school on producing an independent movie and licensing. Then later would co-found a company called UFO, where we made our movies based on licensing, pre-contract licensing, and then making the movie from that money. That's what Trimark was before, and they were first a video store, then they were that, and then they did theatrical presentations, but still they were always more of an independent than not that big of a studio per se. But I learned a lot of production and distribution, licensing, and funding from that perspective. You get a lot of information on set about technical camera equipment, camera lights, Lecos, all these names of whatever products or tools there are on making a show. But when it comes to the actual viability of producing something and what's costs and how you're going to recoup it, I've learned that from Leprechaun.
Yeah, you really kind of look at that period of time through a microscope, and you think about companies like Trimark, like Full Moon Pictures, who are kind of producing a lot of these oftentimes direct to VHS movies, and they're really successful at it. And it's like an era we're not really seeing today in the same way. So yeah, there's definitely some lessons to be learned there. I think still to this day you can glean from those companies what they did.
I think Full Moon had 200 movies by the year 2000. That was their slogan on their website or on their posters and whatnot. And remember, this is back in, we're talking from 80, I think 86 was Leprechaun, right? Or 84, 85, in that span.
Leprechaun would have been actually 93.
What am I thinking of? So 93, 94, right? Because I think Mike Myers said, Mike Myers on Saturday Night Live, they gave Leprechaun the best movie of the year because it was the only movie that had just come out that year. And that was a joke because Mike and Jen were friends. I think he or somebody knew Jennifer through Mike. But in that era, that everything was still not really digital yet. It really hadn't moved fully into digital until Y2K. People were still faxing everything back and forth, and they were dial up on modems and what so nothing really moved into that digital age back then. So anytime you could get information, you couldn't download it like we can today. I can change my front end steering on a 4-wheel drive and download it in the morning and get it done by that afternoon. You just didn't have these kind of access to information unless you were actually there.
Now, these days I'm kind of just waiting for like the gritty, dark reboot of Leprechaun. But kind of on that note, did you ever get called back, or did they ever try to recruit you for any of the many Leprechaun sequels?
Oh, there's that would be counterproductive. We already know how to kill that rascal. You don't bring the guy back. You don't bring us back. You bring the Leprechaun back, which you keep us. You got to have a new batch of fresh faces to destroy. That's the franchise model, right? Destroy people, destroy property, take people's clothes off, defy authority. And you keep doing that regularly on a franchise. Slap a name on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there you go.
I'm gonna put that slogan on a T-shirt. That's brilliant.
It's not I didn't make it up. I mean, it's really been around for a while. I think it's in one of these movies I think I saw back in the day, but it's almost like, for example, on April Fool's Day, I cornered Frank Mancuso Sr., who came to see us shoot in Vancouver Island, and his son was producing the movie. And he at the time was head of Paramount. And I just asked him, I just remember these things come out of the blue and I don't know what spawns it, but I asked him, what would you tell a first time producer if you were to give advice? What would your best advice? And he basically said, you hire a no-name cast, you have a strong horror type or a wide appeal concept film, and you hire the best director of photography and production manager you can get for the money, pull them off a big movie, because they're going to bring your movie in on time, so you're not going to lose your money. And then you just go with the best talent you can find. Don't pay for the talent, the name, pay for the talent and talent. And then your story will, because the star is the genre, right? You don't need to have a star in a horror film. You need to have the horror film be the star, and people want to see, and discover new people.
That's very true, and I think that's probably why there's so many, to this day, still, like, more independent horror movies than any other type of genre out there when they're indie, up-and-coming films, because it's just the kind of thing you can make on a budget, but you can also just really make it look really wonderful. And same thing with Leprechaun, too. Rewatching it, I'm, like, really looking at the cinematography, the lighting choices they made. You mentioned, like, the set design. I'm looking back at it 20 years later, more than 20 years later, I'm like, wow, this is really good. They shouldn't
and
be
we
this good,
shot that at 35. Remember, we shot that at 35 millimeter, right?
Yeah.
And that's a whole different lighting setup. It's another drain on production on time and effort and money, and you can always get checking the gate. You hear that, checking the gate. There could be a hair in the gate, and when you do, and oh my God, we don't have a clean gate. Got to reshoot it. That kind of stuff was what we dealt with back in the film era. And then when you get into the digital era, well, now you've got a lot more freedom to set lighting and to create things, because you're not worrying about cost of film. Just shoot it, right? Yeah, it's a big difference in that technology standpoint.
Trek Untold will return momentarily.
Trek Untold is brought to you by Triple Fiction Productions. Triple Fiction Productions produces affordable and unique 3D printed Trek-inspired products from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and the movies. Ranging from prop replicas to use in a fan film or cosplay, to accessories or playsets for figures in all different sizes, Triple Fiction Productions has got you covered. Past pieces for toys have included large centerpieces like 10 Forward from the Enterprise D, shuttlecrafts complete with working lights, and the Voyager Bridge, with smaller pieces including Borg alcoves, the Genesis device, and the dreaded arch-enemy of Worf, barrels. All highly detailed products are 3D printed and hand-painted in the USA, with new items added all the time, while simultaneously improving their printing quality based on fan feedback. To learn more about their products, visit triple-fictionproductions.net or visit them on Facebook at facebook.com/triplefictionproductions. Want to get 10% off your next purchase? Use code UNTOLD10 at checkout to receive this discount. Not applicable during sales or clearance events. That's code UNTOLD10 to get 10% off action figure dioramas, accessories, and prop replicas. Triple Fiction Productions, taking Star Trek where no 3D printer has gone before.
Hey, I'm Licia Nav, aka Ensign Sonia Gomez from Star Trek TNG, and now Captain Sonia Gomez on lower decks with her own ship, the Archimedes. Yay! I finally got a promotion after 25 years. So anyway, I'm here to talk about drivebydogooders.org. It's a little charity I run where we go to the outskirts of Skid Row, and from our car windows, we hand out basic human essentials like water, wipes, cold stream cheese, socks, tarps, masks, t-shirts, things to keep people warm. So we just think that everyone deserves clean water, some protein, and a way to clean themselves, especially during Corona. We also hand out masks to those who really, really need it, who live in tents on the street, mainly the disabled and elderly who have a really hard time getting to services. And we do all of this with no agenda, just pure giving, no overhead. If you'd like to go to the website and donate, it's 100% tax deductible. And if you click on the donate button, you can go right to the $35 option and pick a signed autograph picture of either the Star Trek The Next Generation or Lower Decks, or Total Recall, where I played the three-breasted mutant hooker on Mars, and that's the X-rated version. Put in the comments section your address and anything you'd like me to write, and I'll personally inscribe it and mail it off to you immediately. And again, that's drivebydogooders.org. Captain Sonia Gomez signing off.
We now return to Trek Untold.
All right, well, Ken, let us beam into our Star Trek discussion finally here, and we are talking now about the season 7 episode Bloodlines, and you were Jason Vigo, who was the maybe son of Picard, maybe not. No spoilers here. Maybe spoilers later. We'll get to them. But yeah, we're talking now Star Trek finally. So, oh, look at that! You actually have your little action figure.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm sorry, I threw you off, didn't I?
I was going to ask about the action figure because I got that. I got that toy too. But yeah, I'm curious. Had you ever actually auditioned for Star Trek previously?
I had not auditioned for the show. I did after for different types of or offshoots of that producing company. I forgot what they were, but I know I knew the director Les Landau was a friend of mine. He'd worked on a series with me prior on something. I can't remember what. Maybe it was Riptide or something. And he brought me in, and so I didn't really have to. I pretty much was offered the role. When you get to a certain point in that time in business, when there was only 3 television stations or 4 with Fox, you got on a list, and there's like 6 of us or 7 of us on the list. Clooney was one of them. I was one. Rob Youngblood, C. Tommy Howell, and these kind of guys. Just you're on the list, right? And you get the offers and you go for it. This was like really, really cool because I'm like, oh my God, to be on a Star Trek, that's like to tick that box. That's huge for me. It's really big. And so one thing I noticed about being on this set when I showed up was how beautiful the sets were. I mean, real wood, not phony stuff. This gorgeous mahogany, the carpentry guys and the set designers really love their sets. And when you're just there, you feel you're on this magical, high quality. Everything's really quality and real. It isn't just, wheel it around and it's a strange, shape on the back. It's really amazing stuff. One thing I found really interesting too is all of our uniforms had to be fitting a kind of a conformity, So we had to have, no one could have really big pec muscles or big shoulders. They had to make sure that if you're around people, they evened all of us up for the most part, right? And the girls too. Some of the girls had to have the padded bras because some actresses on the show were larger and they can't strap that down. So they ended up, giving people a little bit more of a balance along those lines. I thought that was interesting. Attention to detail of not letting anybody be so out there, in terms of their appearance. Unless they're like, Matt, like what's his name, White, the giant.
Michael Dorn, talk about Worf.
Michael Dorn's one of them. There's another guy who was a pro wrestler who was like White. Sam White, is it? No.
You talking about Paul White?
Paul White, yeah.
Yep, just had him on the show a few weeks ago, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the same idea, you can't hide. The guys are
not at all. Like, he's lucky he just had to be spray painted green. He had a little bit of a different kind of problem to deal with.
Unfortunately, I didn't have that all. To be honest with you, I'm known as Lucky Ken, truly. And this was one of those lucky moments. I get to beam up onto the ship and from spelunking the cave, right? And then I get to be kind of a comical moment of, that bit of lightheartedness of, oh my God, what is this? Where am I? And then it had drama. I got to do, with my long lost sort of father, Jean-Luc. That scene that we shot, we shot a lot of scenes together, and he's Royal Academy,
I gotta ask you about that too. Like, were you at all intimidated to work with that? Because at this point you are a fairly seasoned veteran actor, but I mean, it's Patrick Stewart. It's still pretty intimidating, isn't it?
The beauty of Patrick, as I was not at all intimidated, what I felt was totally supported. He was right there with. There was no judgment. There was nothing. There was nothing. It was beautiful. Being with him was really enjoyable. And you just felt in your moment. You're in charge of your character, and you're relating. It's that ease in relating. That you can find in that scene where we're sitting together on the cliff. Is just that it's natural, and you. I don't know how to describe it other than the genuine quality that he brought in that moment with what those 2 characters are about, feeling each other out as, are you my father and are you my son, and all this nervousness and trying to, you know, bond and connect, that we didn't know at that point if we were related. That scene is shot from the stage is on where we were, is like ground level, maybe 10 feet up, and then below is where they've dug out, like as you get underground parking, and they built this slope of a cliff, and so the camera is way down and shooting way up. It looks like we are right up there in the mountains on a cliff, and we're only about, you know, 8-9 feet off the ground. But it was really bad. It was pretty spectacular, and it's pretty cool to be part of something like that. Now I have a toy. I got a little character that's, you know, Jason Vigo.
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of the scenes you got to do with Patrick Stewart, because it's really kind of watching the journey of how you two are trying to form a relationship. And I think really upon the first viewing of seeing this, I feel like, you know, maybe the first time I see it, it was almost so awkward in the beginning because you guys are trying to feel each other out. But then you get to that moment, as you just mentioned, where now it's like you guys finally have that connection. So I think there's a lot of real subtle, nuanced acting as you guys kind of build this relationship through the course of the episode here. But, you know, I'm kind of wondering, you know, and this kind of brings me back to how you talked about the encounters that you did, you know, when you were kind of coming up and looking towards acting as being the next thing you wanted to do. When you're doing these scenes with Picard, and especially that one where you're sitting on the, you know, the quote unquote mountaintop there, was that at any point, like, did it become too real for you at any point? Did it come like maybe closer to home than you wanted it to be? Did you like channel something from within you for that? Or how did you approach that?
Yeah, so again, I think from the background of the encounter groups and the times with people who are really opening up their hearts with me, and I was with them, you use sometimes yourself as you allow them to use you. So if you have an issue with your mother or your father, then I would provide that space for you. You look in my eyes, and pretty soon you only see their eyes and my eyes. And then that emotion and everything is reconnecting for you. And it's becoming more and more of a release and clarity and all that kind of thing. That's the kind of quality I found with Patrick, was sitting with him. We both came at that from that same position. And all I had to do was look in his eyes and see this. And you fall into the character of this guy's, you know, he abandoned my mother. And he, you know, and now he's, you know, she's dead now. She's gone because of, you know, and now I'm on my own, and you're running this fleet commander. I mean, and there was that opportunity just to feel that, and he provided a really good of guilt and remorse, and at the same time he's still knows he's not really convinced yet. He doesn't, you know, because we didn't know at that point. We thought so, and it was getting more and more. But then Bach got nailed.
Yeah,
and also I gotta say, Matt, being on this set, Data, everybody, you know, now I'm starstruck. Now I'm with, you know, now you're walking through Wonderland, and you're seeing all these guys that I'd see a lot of actors doing celebrity charity stuff like tennis and whatever, hockey, but some of these guys I didn't see. But they're up there. They're main characters in this kind of series, and it was really fun to be around them.
I've never heard anybody have anything bad to say about hanging out with Brent Spiner, but I don't think you got too many scenes with him. But you did get to have a scene with Marina Sirtis, and I'd like to hear how that went, because that's okay. Yeah, for folks who are listening to the audio version, we just got a pretty big eyebrow shrug there. Oh my.
Well, yeah, you know, there's a limit to what the Roddenberry group or whatever they are. That, you know, they want to, in terms of sexuality. You gotta watch it here. It's a family show. And she is so sexy and so hot, and sitting with her, my character gets to come on to her like that. And yeah, exactly. She was, you know, it's fun. That's the wonderful part about our jobs, is you get to do it. You get to fall into that scenario or that scene, that moment in time, and kind of really, you know, explore and play with it and see and have fun with it. Obviously up to a point, but it's fun when you're doing that with somebody else who's with you on that. You know, it can be miserable if the other actor, you know, is just turned off by you and what your choices are, or if I'm doing something inappropriate. That's miserable. Not that I've ever done that. I'm just saying, you know.
Good cover.
I'm just saying, you know, it's a tightrope, and when you do cross over it, and you feel that trust with each other and acceptance, and you can go into it more, it's really fun. she's so sexy, so beautiful.
It hasn't changed, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just think it's so fun to like looking at the episode and looking at Jason Vigo. It's like here's this character and here's this actor who's like uber cool, the personification of cool. And basically every scene you have to do, you are basically like super awkward because you don't really fit into this world, and you're trying to find your way with Picard. You're trying to mac on your counselor at the same time. I mean, it's like he's just super awkward, despite at the same time being so damn cool. That's gotta be a lot of fun
I
to
also
play like
feel
that.
awkward in my outfit too because it was a little tight and I was
Yeah,
getting a little
was
bit of a fat. Yeah, I was like, you know, how you get a little self-conscious and you're sitting in a slouch. You're like, I'm quite gonna have a roll here going on. Yeah, it's pretty snug outfit. Yeah, uber cool. I tell you what is uber cool though was over the time we've gotten to work, like for example, Gunsmoke, you know, the remake, to be with James Arness and Amanda Blake. That I also grew up watching them, like William Shatner. So having, you know, those opportunities to be, you know, with people of that ilk, you know, is just, it's really, you know, it's all you could ever ask for, truly. To say I've been able to work with these people I grew up watching. They were big stars and made big impacts.
So now Ken, I was trying to find like a good way to fit this in, and I guess since we're talking about outfits, maybe this is the segue to make it less creepy sounding. But you know, looking back on your career, I really got to kind of watch you transform your body. And we're talking about, you know, a lot of the roles you had where you're either in a really small, tight tank top, or you're a stripper who's running around naked with no pants on,
Right.
or you know, now at this point too, it's about '93 when you did Star Trek, probably '93, '94, whatever it was, and not far off from Leprechaun. You were pretty big at that point too. I mean, you're pretty buff at that point. So I would love to know what was your workout routine to where you are, you know, to when you got to, I guess let's call it peak mass, if you will, at this point in your life.
Peak mass. Like, well,
Beefy boy.
yeah, right. Peaky Blinders. Summer school got it rolling first. The funny thing is, my wife was a dancer and then became a personal trainer later in life, and we're a very athletic family. All the kids are athletes, but from that standpoint in time in the career, I really I should have stayed with it more, but I was playing a lot of ice hockey. And I wouldn't eat after 6 o'clock, 5:36. I'd heard that Stallone said that was a good thing for Rocky. He didn't eat after a certain time, then took arginine, you know, amino acids basically to keep his metabolism going. And so if you speed up your metabolism and you eat healthy, stay away from the obvious things like alcohol and carbs that are going to just like show up, then it's pretty much easy to maintain, you know, and grow along those lines. But I got lazy at times too. You know, the older you get kids and you get a dad role and you get the stresses of family and all these things start to mount up, and the glorious acting career starts to change into something where you know you're holding on to that as long as within reason, because you know you age out in this profession. You can age right out of one category and you can reemerge later in something completely different. Dean Cameron's doing a great job at that, right? He aged out as the goofy, you know, surfer, snowboarding guy with crazy, very good guitarist, by the way. Dear friend for many, many years. Now he looks like Santa Claus, you know, his hair, his beard, but he would play the judge. He would play anything that's in another world, completely different. And he has a very pleasing look and a very good style about him. So that kind of stuff, but there's a gap in time, you know, and sometimes if you have to really keep it go as long as you can. And then after a while, you know, I just don't play the 19-year-old anymore. I don't play the 21, and I'm not that 31-year-old guy. Where am I? I'm in this range. And that's where you start to like find every actor thinks their last job's their last job.
I mean, I'm sure for Ken Olandt, the dad bod is like just a 6-pack instead of a 12-pack, so I wouldn't be too worried about that.
My wife would disagree, but then again, she's like, you know, the hard ass. You know, she's really, you know, she's an Olympic trainer, so it's yeah. But, no, I think hockey. Having the hockey background was really helpful. That was good core strengthening. I loved playing. I was playing 2-3 times a week. Just stay active. We also had horses at one point. Around about the time of Superforce, we had bought some land in a place outside of LA and had horses. And that's anything outdoor work. For example, on Leprechaun, when I would go to shoot each day shooting, I would sink a pole in my land. So I'd dig a hole and then go to Leprechaun. And so that was my routine, was digging a hole, like exercise in the morning or in the evening. And then I knew I'd set a pole, each day, pour, head the concrete, whatever, just in the rocks. And that was, I think that kind of activity, outdoor activity, keeps you pretty fit.
So that's the secret of the Leprechaun bod right there.
Right. No, I had weights on set. I always, like everybody does. Don't let them fool you.
Gotta get your pump on.
You always get, before you're gonna go before camera, you do your curls, your pitches, your push-ups, your dips. You got to get all that upper body pumped. Yes, no question. If they're lying if they say they didn't, and they're idiots if they didn't. So that's,
I did a set before I came on this interview, but
I can see.
Yeah, totally. You are such a good liar. You are a wonderful actor. Now, looking back and doing this Bloodlines episode, got to get back to Star Trek at some point here. Looking back at this episode here, did you actually watch it when it first aired?
Oh yeah, that's the fun of that's the real fun of being an actor, is especially back in the day, because it would come on and then it would rerun later like in the summer. I think we were in that world too. When it comes on, everyone's gathered around, your friends, your family, your agent, all that stuff. When you come on and you watch it, it's kind of like theater in that regard. You're watching your own show. It's your show, and everyone's like, "Yeah, good job. Yeah, it was exciting." That's fun. You let everyone know your show's going to be on. Remember the old TV guides? Yeah, we would have our names. Yeah, you get those things out and you would highlight them and go, "Okay, TV guide." Someone do an article on you. For those who don't know, a TV guide was before the internet. Was a magazine that would be printed in all these supermarkets, and it had the full TV schedules of all the networks. And so this was basically, the rundown of whatever's going to be on television. That's the only way you'd find it, or you'd watch a promo on the show, on the series, or on the station. That's the only way of ever knowing what's going to be on television. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Today it's like, you can know in 10 seconds I find out. Yeah.
I don't know when the last time is that you've actually watched the episode. I know most actors don't sit there rewatching their old episodes, things like that. But I'm curious, when the last time is that you've seen it, and even if you haven't seen it in a while, just thinking about it, and considering what you know today about acting and what your abilities are today, is there anything that you think you would have changed about your performance back then? Anything you would have done differently?
Looking back, to be honest with you, and I'm being really, and I don't need to sound cocky or conceited at all, because I looked at it and I thought that was really a good performance. I really felt good about it all. And I actually saw a bit of it recently when it would come on and they videotaped it and then they posted it on a group chat or whatever it was. We're in our family, lots of kids, lots of friends and so forth. And I watched that piece of it. And I have no, there's always moments and times you wish but that's the pitfall of every actor, and you can't ever make it's over with. But if you look at the overall body of the scenes, now I'm quite happy with it. Quite happy.
It's a very good episode. Yeah, it's some really great work by you with all the folks you got to work with. Real good. I feel like it's one of those ones that people don't talk about quite as much, but it's worth rewatching. So if anybody out there who's listening to this right now hasn't seen it in a while, definitely go back and do it, because I don't know why you're not. So this was, again, the final season of Star Trek TNG, but there was still DS9, there was Voyager, Enterprise, and whatever else that came on after that. But did you ever get any callbacks, or did you ever audition for any of the roles on other Star Trek shows?
So what year was the Bloodlines? The actual year? 80?
That would have been 93 or 94, I think.
93. Right. Okay, so 93, that was the third to last episode of the season. And I think I auditioned for not a Deep Space Nine, but another one of these Voyager. I think it was Voyager. I was auditioning for a role in Voyager. And that was right around the time I was starting to age out of the business. I think I did at that point. The next things I did was a movie called Power Play, which is a hockey movie, and then I did Digital Man, and that's an independent, sci-fi movie. That as that happened, I moved into producing. So that was the bridge from Star Trek. Those last shows there, a few episodes of things here and there, like a JAG episode or something like that. But really, from that in 93, 95, we formed UFO. And that was just a couple of years after this, right?
And just so folks know, too, UFO is a unified film organization, and that was you. And was there anybody else along with you that was doing that company?
Well, there's Phil Roth was his name, and he is his name. He's still alive. Also, that company is now Bavarian Unified Film or Bulgarian. It's moved to Bulgaria. They shoot everything out of Bulgaria and run the company from Bulgaria, basically an offshoot. It's no longer a unified film organization that was wound down. We were actually purchased by a company that was a public company. It was our distribution partner in Germany. And the way that works is you have different territories. You buy your movies and they buy in bulk. They buy, what if you have 3 or 4 movies, then they'll give you a contract for all of them. And that's your sale for that territory. That one German company went public and they ended up buying UFO. At that point in time, I produced about somewhere around 12 movies or 15 movies. And it was really fun. We were the first to do desktop level animation to go out to a 35 millimeter film. So what that means is everyone's still shooting in 35 millimeter. We would shoot our green screen, and then we would have a film scanner and take that footage into the computer. Our animators will be building around that footage, and then we composite it back through After Effects at the time and put that into the burn a new negative and put that a new film and put that in negative. 9 reels was what you have to deliver for a feature film. It's a lot of right? It's a lot. Not just a little cassette. It's 9 reels of film. And we were doing 3 of those a year. And it was, you can imagine how much work is involved making, an action picture with 10-minute battle scene of spaceships, warring it out in space with top level animation, to the point where we were hiring these guys and we had 15 animators, 3 edit bays. It was a real studio, mini studio. And we talked with Newtek, they were the makers of Lightwave, which was at the time the best software for animation. Then Maya came along, and so I left acting, if you would, just basically devote all into the production side, which was, I was doing finance, I was doing, executive producing, acting in some of the movies, this and that. But really, and casting doesn't really want to hear from you once you're the producer, because now you're the enemy. You know too much when you're the producer. When you're an actor, you're kind of like their little toy, and they get to, oh, he's so wonderful, they discover you, but now you're the hiring guy. And then you're looking, it's a different dynamic. So, and then, I wasn't going to Bulgaria because I got all these kids and I like the family life. So that was really where my life sort of made a turn out of the entertainment industry. And I exited basically from that standpoint of being a producer, and just moved into finance altogether. And then down the road, I have a buddy that I play hockey with, was a partner in a company called Eagle Rider, and he introduced me to the idea of being a tour guide. And I said, that sounds like a tequila talking bop. And he says, no, check it out. It's fun. And you think your time in life, you probably enjoy it. And I did, and I got into it. So now I'm partner in a company called Explorify. And my job is to run the tours, motorcycle guided and self-guided tours. We go across the country over 15 days on Harleys, and all over the world actually too.
That's very cool. I mean, how has COVID affected your business? I'm really curious about that now, because this is now a bike tour. It's kind of a personal thing. You're riding with a bunch of people. Were you able to keep doing tours while COVID was happening? No.
COVID changed everything, as it did for everyone else. And we were really smart. The leadership in this company turned the corner fast and sold and unloaded all of our motorcycles. So we didn't sit on any stock, and worry about that, and downsized quickly so we could wait for this thing to evolve. And then as it's come back, it was actually in Las Vegas at a convention called the IPW, and this is where all the travel agents come and booking agents. And literally, the morning of the day that it opened, they made an announcement that November 8th, Biden said the country's going to open up. Suddenly, everyone's phones are ringing and they're getting emails, and now they're coming over and they're talking about booking and doing business. So it was exciting, and now it's been just really growing fast. So I'm so busy with, I'm leading some tours. I travel around the world, England, trade shows. I'm going to Canada next weekend.
I know we've like teased this for the entire duration of the interview now. We just talked about some of your work, with UFO, but we've mentioned William Shatner's name a few times now, and you had said you'd done some stuff with him. So we got to talk about the Shatner.
Well, just prior to working with Bill, I'd worked with his daughter, Melanie, in a Western, like quite a few years prior. So that was my 1 degree of separation from Bill. And then this movie was called Falcon Down. And we had Judd Nelson, and William Shatner, and a football kicker named Dean Busucci, who used to kick for the Colts, was a friend of mine too. But Bill was super gracious and really fun. I mean, he has a great sense of humor, and he has that smile that is like a Chester cat grin, when he just is, but he's Canadian. So he and I really bonded on that level. We understand each other. I'm not Canadian, but I know and spent much of my life, and my best friends in high school are all back in Vancouver. And Bill and I had a real good relationship. He's just a really good guy. He was a lot of fun on the set. He was a prankster, but he's very professional. And it's like him and like Martin Sheen. I've had him on Storm. Man, wow, it's just, they set a tone. Just showing up, they set a tone. Was particularly with Bill, because Bill, everybody knows Bill from Star Trek, and that's like, it's as American as normal as cornflakes. Everyone knows this show. Marty was more like some of the hardcore movies, Platoon, or was it
Apocalypse Now?
Apocalypse Now, right? And other things. So he was more of the drama side. Bill was really just that guy you looked at and you go, there's only one of you, man. There's only one of you. There's no you can never find a William Shatner like person. There just aren't. There's none out there.
Now, we also saw this a little bit earlier in the interview, and I think it's time we bring it back out. Now, your Star Trek action figure, the Jason Vigo action figure. So, yeah, I mean, you got a little tiny one, though, is difference here. So, what do you think about your little dude?
So what's wrong with my masculinity? I'm very comfortable in that. I think I'm just thrilled that I have it. They made one that I got to keep for posterity. It's really cool, and my son bought it off eBay. He found it and sent it to me. So that's why it's a little banged up. I think some kid had gotten a hold of it and tossed it around. Didn't like it for Christmas or something. But that's too little. It's cool, isn't it? Have your own little action figure immortalized, if you will.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you too a little fun fact here, because I actually collect the Playmates, mostly the Playmates, the Star Trek figure prototypes. So I can tell you that actually somewhere out there exists a full-sized figure of what you had in that pack right there. Yeah, so I found this out because I actually got one. I got it was a figure of Brent, who never had, I know this name probably means nothing to you because you're not like a super hardcore nerdy Trekkie like me, but this character named Brent, who never got a full-size 4.5-inch figure, but he got one in that size that you have like with that ship. And I managed to buy, it's called a hard copy. So it's basically like when they first sculpt it out of wax, they'll then usually make a mold out of that, and they'll use resin to then make a copy of it. And that's like the earliest version of that prototype. So it's a hard copy of that figure. And so I know that's basically the same way they did it with those figures. So somewhere out there is a 4-inch version that probably has like really amazing detail of your face in it that who knows where the hell it is now.
Wow, if anybody listening knows where we can find this, it would be amazing. I'll give you, if you're a motorcycle rider, I'll cut you a great deal. I'll give you a free motorcycle ride or rental. Yeah, no, that would be awesome. It really would be awesome to find that. How would you know? How would you ever find that? The model makers would know from these toys?
There's like a whole sub-community of folks who just buy prototypes and things like that out there. So a lot of digging.
Wow.
You never know where these things pop up. I've gotten stuff from all sorts of different people. It's almost like a black market out there for this kind of thing. So we'll ask around. We'll try and find the Jason Vigo out there. It's got to be there somewhere.
It's got to be one, Matt. That's so wonderful. If we could find that, I'd love to have that just for posterity. My kids got a chance to see, my older daughters got a chance to see me at a screening we did for April Fool's Day, and they'd never seen that movie. Weirdness, right? They'd never seen it. Here we are at a screening, and we're just a small one for the director, a few of the actors, and it's on 35 millimeter in Hollywood. It was really, really special. So it's fun for them to go, well, my God, Dad, they had no idea of the work that I did prior, really. We didn't show a lot of my stuff around, I don't know why. It's weird, isn't it?
There's plenty of places they can watch now. We got Amazon, we got Netflix. They can find your stuff.
The Ken Olandt Film Festival is coming out.
All right, so Ken, as we come towards the end of this interview here, I'd love to know, just looking back on your career as a whole, what was the best day you ever had in a set, and what was the worst day you ever had in a set?
Oh man, you hit me with that one out of the blue. The best day that I ever had on a set, I guess the best days I think I've had was the scenes I did on Star Trek. Those are those just because of the beautiful sets, the fantasy of it all. The crew was so friendly and they all knew each other so well. And Patrick is like, he's an icon. Gunsmoke, the remake, that was a big one. Highway to Heaven with Michael Landon, big time. Working on those sets with those guys. Carl Reiner. It's really hard to say what's the best one. What's the worst one? The worst time I had on the set was when I was shooting April Fool's Day, and I had to just swim in the water after I run out of the boathouse, and I'm supposed to swim and then call back. I can't make it. Tide's too strong. And this is in like October in Vancouver in the ocean. And I'm in a Speedo. And I almost got hypothermia coming back. So that was about the worst time I've ever had on a set. But it's really tough. I'd say Star Trek and Gunsmoke, Highway to Heaven, and Summer School are, because of who I'm working with, really are up there.
Good answer. Yeah. Good answer. Yeah, I'll take that. So, most valuable piece of advice that anybody has ever given you about either life or acting, or maybe even both?
So the most important piece of information I ever got was from Sylvester Stallone. And I ran into him when I was reading for the Revenge of the Nerds movie. I was running down, I just remember this all so well. I was running down the aisleway, and between these areas of these offices with this bullpen of all these, cubicles and so forth. And Sly was standing at this, with his back out to it. And I'm running down the hallway, and I see him. And I stop. And this is at that gregarious, cocky time of my life when I went, hey, man, you should write a book about your whole Rocky experience and all that stuff. And he looked at me and he's like, that sly grin. He goes, hey, there are no rules. There are no rules. And I went, yeah, but what you did, would really inspire people and let to know from your perspective and your ideas. I think that was what I tried to say. He turned around and he said to me, I smiled, and he put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, strength and charm. Never forget that. Strength and charm. The way I saw that, and repeat back, strength in that you were confident with yourself and being who you are, and be your own best friend. Charm and love people, just love them. What they're like, children with their toys. When they're talking about their project, enjoy it with them on that level of charm and genuine. And I lived by that when I would meet people in this, because I felt good about me going in, and I felt good about them. I made sure of it. So that was great advice from Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, definitely. And I can tell it's been very actionable, because, even just talking today for the first time ever, I could definitely feel that strength and charm coming from you. So, you're definitely living that quote. So that's great. So last thing for today, Ken, what is the best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe?
The best thing about being a part of the Star Trek universe is that you're part of a very unique group and a large one, but you're of a fraternity, if you will, sorority, fraternity, just a family, a body of actors. And the beauty of this gives you your own place in the sun to stand. So there's no other, for me, fortunately, I have Jason, and that's a big part of that link of everything. And one of the greatest things I got for that was doing what's that chiller show. And a fella came up to me and he had a poster. He heard I was there and he says, I've got everybody's signature on this but yours. So I said, listen, it's going to cost you a lot of money. No, I said, I'd be happy to. I was just thrilled that, I could make this guy's day by giving him the last signature he needed to have this, Star Trek poster filled with all the people that were on the show that he could get a hold of, pretty cool. So I find that very few opportunities you get that ability to interact with people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Have you ever done any Star Trek conventions?
I've never done one. I'd love to do one.
We gotta fix that.
Huh?
We gotta fix that. I talked to so many guests in the show, and they say that they do all these other things. They've done chiller, but never a Star Trek con. We got to get Ken Olandt at Star Trek Mission or something like that.
They probably thought I was MIA. I don't know. I would love to do it. It's just fun. And they're particularly this one would be special. When you do a chiller and you have a movie, they're different. They're separated. When you're doing a Star Trek convention, you're in the team. You're on the team. You're in the family. Yeah, it's kind of neat.
Yeah, we got to make that happen out there. So, folks, campaign to the folks over at Star Trek Mission. Let's get that to happen. Let's get Ken Olandt at a proper Star Trek convention, finally, please. And Ken, just one last time to you today. Can you let our folks know at home what the website is for the motorcycle tour company?
It's called Explorify, and Explorify motorcycle rentals and tours. And it's really amazing experience, or bucket list kinds of things that you do if you're a motorcycle rider and you want to see the country, meet new people from all over the world, riding new motorcycles, not only Harleys, but all different kinds of models. But it is an amazing 2 weeks you'll spend seeing having peak moments in amazing places with new friends. Just amazing.
That sounds very
Glorified.
Yes, all right, so everybody check that out. We're going to have links for it, a place you can check it out in the show notes, so make sure you go ahead and look that up. Ken, thank you so much for chatting today, giving us so much of your time, so much of your great stories. Strength and charm, that definitely sums up Ken Olandt. So thank you so much for chatting today. Really appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Thanks, Matt. It's been my pleasure, really.
That's it for this week's episode of Trek Untold, and thank you for checking it out. One more time, if you're not following us on social media, please do so by checking us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Trek Untold, and that's all one word, no spaces, on any of those platforms. If you want to check out the video version of this podcast to see our guests, head over to youtube.com/nerdnewstoday, where I post the video version of this show every Sunday after the initial episode airs on Thursdays. Shout out to our sponsor, Triple Fiction Productions, who create 3D printed toys and prop replicas inspired by Star Trek. Their items come in all shapes and all sizes and are always amazing. If you're in a position to financially support Trek Untold, please consider heading over to patreon.com/TrekUntold to become one of our Patreon supporters. There's a lot of cool perks that you can get by becoming a Patreon supporter, including early access to the episodes, the ability to ask our guests questions, and a lot more cool stuff coming very soon. Please consider leaving a rating and review on iTunes or any other audio platforms that you listen to the show on that allow you to do so. Or if you're one of our YouTube audience members, please make sure you comment on this video and give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Special thanks to Scott Ray for providing us with this week's guest. If you'd like to book them for an autograph signing or convention appearance, email Scott at scottray67@aol.com. Until next time, I'm Matthew Kaplowitz. This has been Trek Untold, and remember, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold is sponsored by TrekSphere.com, promoting fan-produced Star Trek content in all forms, is powered by the Rageworks podcasting network, and is affiliated with Nerd News Today.